morning. It's so nice to see all my favourite people in a room. I love this. It's wonderful. So my name's Naomi and I am one of the co-founders of the Office Space, our beautiful space upstairs. So this is our 6th year and the end of our 6th year of doing these Insight events. So we have covered quite a bit of territory this year. As you can see, I have a co-host with me today, which has never happened in 6 years.
Totally untrained.
And she's allowed to kind of make the quips and throw in some questions as well. So we have Helen up here, who's one of our panellists. Actually, I'm going to pass to Helen to do the Welcome to Country. So let's do that before we start.
So I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather and pay my respects to the elders, past, present and emerging, specifically from the aura of the Gadigal people, and to welcome any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are with us, maybe watching online, and of course to acknowledge that the Aboriginal peoples never ceded the land we meet on today.
Amazing. That was Helen's addition at the end, so I love it. She's always going for it. So I also want to acknowledge the Sydney Community Foundation. So these events and your ticket sales go towards that women's incubator that we've been able to support this year. So that they do an incredible work for disadvantaged and migrant women, which is not unlike Helen's story as well. So we're going to get into this, but I mean, 2020, what a year this has been. And as I was saying, we've been looking at different themes throughout the year, and somehow they have all seemed to be around momentum. So I think I'm trying to encourage everyone when it's been purpose, positivity, productivity, pedagogy even, so all these P words, it wasn't deliberate, but as Elaine de Botton acknowledges, a good half of the art of living is resilience. So this November and our final theme for 2020 is about resilience and how do we keep getting up when things don't go according to plan, which is sort of very much this year has gone dreadfully off script for many of us. So as a deliberate reference to people that are inspiring, I have brought together 3 incredible people that I'm very excited to speak to. And I did mention there was going to be a musical act as something triumphant, and because that hasn't happened, Narelle's not here, so I can't ask her to sing for us. She's not in the room. So I was going to get her to come up and sing and just horrify her. So if anyone wants to sing at the end, they're very welcome.
But I'm used to singing Solidarity Forever at the moment.
Oh, okay, we can go
with
that.
In my other life.
Well, and also you'll see on the flyers that you've got that there's details about each of these incredible speakers. So for tonight, I want our lens to be really focused on not just the what of each of these lives, but the how and the things that we can glean. How do you get that? It's almost like a diamond, kind of under pressure, some amazing things can happen. We were going to ask you to sing, Narelle, seeing that our singers aren't here. But let me tell you about Helen, who is extraordinary. And also Saha, who has been on my panel, introduced me to Helen. And I'm just quite amazed at, she almost takes it up a level. So from 16 years of age, working, kind of in poverty and very unequal circumstances, she realised the importance of equal pay. And that is carried through as she came to work in Australia, in Wollongong, representing migrant workers, and then being involved in an incredible movement which went to the High Court of Australia, which was 14 years of fighting against one of the biggest employers kind of in our country, and that ended up being made into a documentary which we can talk about as well, but it's going to be having its screening.
Buy tickets for the Sydney
To buy
event.
tickets. It's the 7th of December. If you go to Women of Steel, it's extraordinary. I've been looking at clips of this, and Helen has been on the PR trail talking about the film. But also, if that wasn't enough, she now rescues farm dogs and from bushfire ravaged places and trains them and rehabilitates them. So I think even one of those things is quite extraordinary. But please welcome Helen McCosher. So, Helen.
Yes, Naomi.
So in 1980, around the time that you arrived here, you also were diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So I want to talk about this first. And can you tell us what is difficult, what can you and what can't you do?
It's a very challenging question.
Tell us.
If if I was being rude, which I'm not,
You're
I'd
allowed
say
to be.
answer silly questions like that. However, I didn't say that. So in some ways I can do everything, as long as I've got enough energy. But of course I can't do things. I can't be a brain surgeon. I can't climb Everest. But I'm sure there's somebody with MS out there trying to climb Everest at this point in time. And yeah, and what can't I do? Is that because of my disability, my gender, my background, my ethnicity? You know, there's all those factors to take into account when you can't do something. I couldn't get a job in the public service after 1980 because I failed the medical, you know. So I went to universities. They took me on, but I took them on too. I took them to anti-discrimination board and the court. So yes, I mean, but in terms of what happens to you, you have an enormous amount of fatigue.
Yeah.
So you have to sort of pace yourself, which I have no idea what that means.
You don't do that.
Because I can't do it. Yeah. So.
And I have deliberately asked that question because Helen hates that question. Every time we have had conversations in the build up to this, it has been such an education, and she taught me the concept of crip porn. So if you can tell us about this, please, because I think it will frame the conversation that we'll have.
Well, I have to acknowledge, and sadly, Stella Young, who died a few years ago, much younger than me. And if you know, oh God, it's going to go out my head, the website and the podcasts that came out of the ABC Ramp Up, it was called. She was the host behind Ramp Up and did some incredible things. But also she did a TED talk on inspirational porn, where which we all love, or crip porn. Not in Australia, but mainly around the English-speaking world. We talk about crips, but here you're sort of, it's a bit
racy.
So crip porn is basically when people, it's a bit like Australian Story actually, where people in wheelchairs do amazing things and then they're told you're so inspirational and you're the most resilient person I've ever met in my life, and yeah, oh God, here we go. That's crip porn, because it's people getting off on what you've done, climbed Everest in a wheelchair, sort of thing, you know. So if you want to have a look on YouTube, her TED talk, Stella Young, she does crip porn brilliantly. So that's why coming to a event on resilience
is so against your grain.
Is somewhat against my grain, because well, it's even happening with the dogs. You see, I foster dogs, you know, who are broken and top of the euthanasia list and all that stuff. And then they're ready for adoption. And everybody says to me, I couldn't do that. You're so strong. I couldn't hand a dog on that I'd retrained. And I say, but they're going to a better place than my house. You know, they're going to a family with grandfather and this. So even that I find, that's nothing to do with disability. It's like, where does this come from that people have to feel that, to tell you that you're the most inspirational, you're the most resilient, you're this, and that? So what the heck is going on? So that led me to look at the meaning of resilience, and that is impossible to find anybody agreeing on that. I mean, I just vaguely Googled it, didn't really have time, but it is a very contested, problematic concept. Because what's the opposite of resilience?
Yeah.
See? I think it's being a loser, and that's not very nice.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a potential for victim blaming and resilience issues all the time. I've been looking at resilience on the news, and it's boom, boom, boom. There's resilience everywhere. COVID people, refugee people, children, resilient. It's really a sort of motherhood term, which is maybe needs redefining.
Sure. And I think that's what's so interesting, because for you, you've spent a lot of your academic career almost reframing the way that these things are discussed and fighting for, you were vice president of the Disability Studies, Society for Disability Studies, which is so highly regarded a society in the US. And so for you, you're almost having to resist against the difficulties. So there's obviously the challenges, but you almost well-meaning people can add more challenge to that by patronising, I guess. So what is sort of the core of a lot of the fight that you've been doing, for example, with the Opera House, or you mentioned against university? So what often are you fighting against? Is it people's, I know the answer, you've told me. It's often about people's mindsets. So maybe share what for you is the fight.
Well, it's discrimination, basically, and that is probably worst. I mean, without being a hierarchy, you know, for Aboriginal people, there's an immense amount of discrimination. And still a lot of discrimination against disabled people. So it's the injustice and it's the unfairness. And if you watch Women of Steel, you know, there's a point where this woman just says, it's unfair, you know. So it's about fairness. And, you know, I'm looking back to, I think by the age of 4, I knew I was in the wrong gender, nothing to do with trans, by the way, just that I couldn't get to play the drum in music or whatever, you know, I had the triangle, and, you know, that sort of stuff. And I remember getting into terrible trouble with my parents because I'd swapped my little dolly pram with the little dolly that I'd cut all her hair off with the boy next door who had a gun and a cowboy hat. And both lots of parents were terribly upset about this. And I said, but I don't want a doll and a pram. No idea why. I just didn't. I wanted the guns and the cowboy hat. So, yes, I think you can become very aware of gender discrimination at younger age. Yeah. So.
And then if we jump forward to the whole situation in the 1980s, so you're working with, you were...
You've forgotten the 60s.
Oh, tell us about the 60s then. Tell us what happened.
I'm very old, I know the 60s.
No, but again, the 60s were an incredible time.
Yes.
So tell us your impression sort of through the 60s.
Look, in the 60s, we believed we could change the world, literally. We knew it, we could do it. And in fact, in many ways, we did. I mean, access to contraception, access to abortion, access to mortgages, being able to sign your own name if you're having an operation without your father or your husband sign it.
Sure.
You know, there was so much shit going on.
Yeah.
But the 60s were, we can do it all. I mean, they did Woodstock over there, you know. So I think that's the difference between then and now is we believed we could change everything. We could stop wars. You know, we could march like mad against Vietnam. And we could set up women's liberation groups. In fact, I set up the first women's liberation group at Durham University, if anybody knows where that is, in the north of England. But that was fun too. And we didn't allow men in. And so men from the Socialist Society wanted to come to the women's
to meet the girls.
Well, they thought it was cool. What are you doing? We're not doing that. And I'd left the Socialist Society because they wanted me to type the minutes, and I thought, stuff that, because I was a typist.
Are you getting a picture here?
So, yeah, the 60s were very important for women, and I realised I had to go to university. Come hell or high water, I had to go, and you can go in England for free. You could go here, I think, at the time for free. So the 60s are very, very important in people my age in terms of what we could do and not do, because we did win a lot.
And I'm going to jump over the 70s and 80s and 90s to now. And I was wondering with you, are we apathetic, but you don't think that's the right answer? What is happening, I guess, in this cultural moment that, you know, we have so much access to education, but...
Well, you don't. You've got to pay a fortune for it now.
True, formal education.
Yeah. Look, it is difficult now. And I can remember I spoke at the Women's March when we were marching against Trump, when women were marching against Trump. And I said, we can go on marches, but we can't just do that. Marches have to then be followed up, blah, blah, blah. And I still sort of feel like, stop marching and start following up and taking action. So that's, I think, the problem now is often younger people, younger than me, which is most of you here, don't feel they're going to win. You know, we can fill a petition, we can do this and do that, but at the end of the day, we're left with Scotty from marketing. So and that's sad. I can remember I used to teach a course on social action and social movements at the university, and I used to ask the whole class at the beginning, including the guys, which weren't many, who would count themselves a feminist, and most would say, nah, too dangerous, you know. And the whole class would say that, and I'd think, what's so wrong with this term? We changed the world. The first wave got the vote, you know. The second wave changed a lot. I mean, why are women so frightened to use the F word? And it's because they say, oh, you know, well, men don't like it, da, 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 da. So I think there's a lot of problems now about not seeing wins, really.
Sure.
I mean, there are a few and far between, but that's why our film is so important. Because
and my impression is it's the work part, because obviously we like the march, but there's a whole lot of work. And if we think of 14 years that these women have also campaigned against lots of setback and even government trying to break apart your group.
14 years, the women who took the case won so many times in various courts, and then BHP appealed with all the money they had, and it was overturned. It just kept happening and happening and happening and happening, and it took 14 years to get to the High Court, where the High Court said, the women are right, BHP is wrong. Woo!
Yeah, yeah.
So actually resilience, or perseverance, I like that word too, is really important for those women who made it. And a lot didn't. They dropped beside the wayside. Sadly, a lot of people died. They were a lot older than me at the time. So that was if we'd have said it's going to take 15 years, nobody would have come to a meeting ever again. But we thought it was winnable. And they just appointed the anti-discrimination first commissioner, who was Carmel Nyland.
Okay.
And you see, at the moment, I have no faith whatsoever in the commissioners in the human rights area. I mean, they're totally, you know, plants by a very reactionary right-wing government, and they don't really do much, in my humble opinion.
And this is the importance of continually advocating your papers, your activism as well. And I remember asking Saha, because you do have so many things that you're doing. It's not an affirmation of you, so I'm nervous now.
I don't mind an affirmation here and there.
But I was wondering, is it driven by the compassion or is it driven by justice? And straight away she said it's justice. So do you agree, is it justice? And you said it's just not fair. For you, it's about righting the wrongs and kind of making things more fair in the world?
Well, I'd also like to think I'm a bit compassionate.
Oh,
I am a trained social worker, so I would be in trouble if I wasn't able to be compassionate. So yes, but it is about changing the way we live in the world. And I've always said to the guys too, feminism is about changing for all of us, not just for women. And it's about how we live in the world today. And but feminism will make a path. I mean, I've got other ideas these days of where we need to go to in, righting the wrongs. And
so there's more work to be done.
Dogs. Yes, so I'm a bit biased on the dog front. So, yes.
And so can I ask as a final question, what is it that sort of drives you, or have you come to a definition of resilience? How do you sort of make it palatable without it being patronising?
I think if we had more time, we'd talk about collective resilience.
Sure, yeah.
And we would talk about resilience as resistance.
Yes, yeah, very good.
Because that was really what the women were doing in the film. So I'm so up on the film because I've been keep watching it and going places.
And you're all going to have to go and watch it.
Yes,
as well.
Yes, it's very good. It's got rave reviews. Even Jason DeRosso on the ABC Radio National, when they were talking about Brazen Hussies, which is the white feminist middle class film, which is all right, but it's whatever. And then Jason DeRosso said, but you've got to go and see Women of Steel. So I thought that was a really good review that we got then. So
look, if only to see part of the journey that you've been part of, I think it's really exciting. But please thank Helen for being here with us. Well, John, I'm going to get you to sit up here so you can blush as I introduce you. So John is an incredible person. There's so many layers as well with his story, and I'm quite a sports fan. So John has worked with some of the biggest sports teams in Australia. So Essendon Football Club, he was handpicked by Kevin Sheedy, worked with the Australian Cricket Club when they toured, was it India or where were they?
Don't let the facts get in the way of a good story.
I know, I'll just keep going on. So.
I went away to the Indian Cricket League and they drew the teams out of a barrel. So you didn't know who you had until you got there. And the name dropped down and the coach was from India, Balwinder Singh. And then the coach for fitness was from Australia, John Quinn. And you are with the team from Bangladesh.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it wasn't the Australian team, it was a team from Bangladesh. And I actually could not stand cricket. I hated cricket.
But John says this was one of the best experiences.
One of the highlights of my sporting
life.
career.
So
and there's not really a fortnight, I'd say a fortnight goes by that I don't hear from one of the players from Bangladesh an update on a birth in the family or something else that's happened for them.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's been incredible, and that's more than a decade ago now.
So what John is doing currently is he's working as you've got two practices, one in Melbourne and one in Sydney, but also he's working with some Olympic hopefuls, so Ishmael and Buster Asim. So we hope that these guys will be part of a team, and I'm really looking forward to unpacking a bit more about that. But please welcome John Quinn. I'm going to bring you a little bit closer. Yeah.
I'm going to get you to grab my water in due course.
Yes. If he starts coughing, do not be alarmed. So, can you tell us about your work and your passions? Paint us a picture of who is John Quinn.
Simple answer is I'm an athletics coach, and I started doing athletics. I was actually a rugby league player. So my background was playing rugby league in country New South Wales, a small town near Canberra called Yass. And I was playing football and I wasn't really that good at it. I was just fast. And I can remember as a very young boy, quite a vivid memory, scoring a try and the coach picking me up. And I don't know if this is significant or not for me, but he was an Indigenous coach and he picked me up in the air and said, "You little beauty," threw me in the air. And I've never forgotten that.
Wow.
And I went on to play what's now called Jersey Flegg for Canberra Raiders. And I still wasn't really that good. I used to be the winger and they'd throw the ball. There's no other options. I just got the ball and I was either going to die or score. But I did enjoy it, and I ended up refereeing because they needed referees. So I was refereeing. I'm still at school and I'm refereeing. That taught me a lot about being strict and being in control, even though you weren't sometimes in control, and taking order amongst a group of individuals, including adults. And I was only probably 15, and I was on the school bus. I used to travel every day to school in Canberra, and I was on the bus coming back, and one of the young boys was quite upset. I was 15, he was 12, and I asked him what was wrong, and he said they weren't going to be playing football that year because no one would coach them because they were pretty well they didn't behave very well. So I went to the committee that night and offered to coach, and they said, "But you're a kid yourself, mate." And I said, "It'll be right. What options have you got?" So they laughed and said, "Go and do it." That was the start of my coaching career, and I started coaching these young ratbags who actually went on that year and won the premiership.
Like a movie.
Nothing to do with coaching. It was all about let's have fun and enjoy what we were doing. So I learnt that very early. And there was a boy in that group, and he was a very good runner. And his father, they owned a big property outside of Yass, and he came to pick up Dean, and I said, "Dean's a very good runner, you should get him coached." And he said, "You reckon?" I said, "Yeah, he's very good." He goes, "When do you want me to bring him in?" And I became an athletics coach. I became a coach, and the group grew and grew and grew, and we're in this little country town, and we had 85 athletes. We used to take them off to compete in all the different things, and they were going pretty well. Like some were even going off to World Juniors and things like that. It was quite an exciting time. And unbeknownst to me, in Sydney, there was a fellow watching who was the CEO of Little Athletics, a guy called Peter Shinnick. and he came down and said, we want you to come to us. So I moved to Sydney then. I was 20 by now, and I moved to Sydney to work for Little Athletics, and I was working for Little A's. I ended up, a degree got offered by Uni of New South Wales as in sports coaching. It was the first one of its kind. And there was this thing tacked on the side of it of physiology. I wanted the coaching, so I did it. And by the time I'd finished that, I had a job with the AIS, who sent me on a secondment to Tasmania, which I was horrified at the time. But that was also a fantastic experience. And I was 26, and I ended up in Tasmania as the youngest coach in the network. And I know there's a couple of Tasmanians in the room, and you can say that this isn't quite correct. I didn't know until I got there. Tasmania is not a state, it's a country. And they talk about Australians and the mainland. And here I was, this 26-year-old down there, and I'm supposed to get the standard up. I learnt very quickly that Tasmania is also a divided country, the north, the south and the northwest. And it's historical. The south was settled with convicts, and if you're ever there, it's very much like the Rocks because it's the same architects. And so you've got all these colonial style buildings. If you go up north, they're beautiful, open landscape driveways. They were the free settlers. You had the free in the north and the convicts in the south, and they could never get over, still to this day, that the government's in the south. And so you've got the north versus south, and then over on the side is the northwest, so they can unify against each other at times.
It sounds like a sports match, doesn't it?
Well, what I did was I unified north, south, northwest against Australia.
Perfect.
Let's go and beat Australia, get the mainlanders. And so it was, all jokes aside, it was a great experience, and we built the Institute program down there. And I was consulting to other sports as well. And
that's
one
where
of them,
the AFL
well,
comes
AFL
in.
came. I couldn't care less about AFL. I told you, I played rugby league and had no interest in AFL. And the boys used to come to get fast or strong for AFL, and then they were going off to a draft camp or a combine or this or that, and then they'd say, we've been selected in this team or that team. Oh, it's fantastic, good on you. And off they'd go. But it was actually quite a significant thing, and the number of Tasmanians was going up because their athleticism was improving, and my name kept coming up, and that's where Kevin Sheedy asked, and there was an opportunity. He said, come to Essendon, and the timing was pretty right. My son, number one, was on his way, and thought it might be a good chance to get back to Sydney, I thought. And so Melbourne was halfway. So off to Essendon I went, I thought, for a year or so, and it changed my life.
And you were there 9 years? How long were you?
10.
10 years.
10 years, but I'm still connected to the club even to this day, and I still do a little bit of work with them. Even this last 48 hours I've done a little bit for Essendon. But within 2 years we'd won a premiership, and that was a surreal moment to just experience that. They have this thing in Melbourne, the whole city stops for football, and we were in a parade down, and I'm in one of them waving to people, and it was just a phenomenal time. Rushed in, we had the grand final, and we won. This was in 2000. We won that, and I'd kept coaching athletics, and I had some good athletes there, and I'd also been named as the Olympic coach that year. So I was the Australian team coach for sprints in 2000. So we won the grand final, and then I had to leave all the celebration to get to the airport to fly to Sydney to be here for the opening ceremony of the Olympics. So
it's crazy.
You wouldn't believe it, would you? And so I've gone from that to that and experienced both things. It was fantastic.
Well, let's talk about the dark part in the middle. So you then, through that process, obviously you're working, having great success. You were working with the GWA team that was set up here as well.
Well, yeah, so we had a few other things happen in there, and then I've left Melbourne and come back to Sydney to start up the Giants in terms of sports science, medical and facilities. And we've built out at Blacktown, and we've got another big facility in at Olympic Park. And I was going along really well. It was, about 2014, and suddenly I got hit. Well, I just started acting strangely, I believe. I don't remember it. So if you could just think that you go to bed tonight, you've had a great night here, I hope. You go to bed tonight, and tomorrow morning you wake up, and things are familiar. Like the bed's the same, and the dress is the same, but it's a different room, because the window that was there is now there. And when you walk out, your son who was 9 is now 16. And your daughter, who was 7, is now 14. And your whole world's been turned on its head.
Tell
You've
us
just
what
missed 7
happened.
years. So that's what happened to me. I felt just 7 years went like that, and everything had changed around me, and I had to catch up. And even as recently as last night, I received a gift of a book by an Essendon player who's now with Richmond called Basher Hooley, and he sent it to me, and it was a gift, and I opened it up, and it had pictures, and I was really rapt to go straight to the picture part of the book, and there was a photo of me in there at a wedding.
Wow.
I knew he was
remember.
married, but I didn't know I went to the wedding.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so I found that out yesterday.
So you had limbic encephalitis, is
Yes,
what the
it's called
diagnosis-
encephalitis. So it's an autoimmune disease where your body turns and attacks different organ, in this case your brain. And it's literally, and there's actually a movie called Brain on Fire. My brain was on fire and I'd had multiple seizures. And the limbic is the primitive part of your brain. So depending on what part, it's almost like a lightning strike, what is going to happen to you. I was ended up, it came to a head when I was supposed to be at a meeting and the football manager at the Giants rang and said, "Where are you, mate? You're supposed to be at a meeting." And I said, "Oh, look, I've been held up. I'm with Choco." Choco was a coach in the AFL. "I'm with Choco. We've been planning our training. We've done a whole year's training this morning." He said, "Really?" And I said, "Yes." Yeah. He said, "Well, you need to be here, mate." I said, "Okay, well, I won't be long." And in the end, I had to ring him because I didn't know where I was. So I rang and said, "Look, I'm sorry, mate, I'm a bit lost." And he said, "Where are you?" And I described it. And he said, "I think I know where you are. Stay on the phone." And so I'm talking to him, and probably 2 minutes has gone by, and he's at the car. I was in the car park at my work. And the guy that Choco, he'd been a coach at the club 2 years previously. He'd long gone. And so I was off. And I say this was my Dancing with Gaga phase. So I was off dancing with Gaga by then. And so he knew then. And a week later, I was in hospital. And then they transferred me to Canberra. So I was closer to my family down there. And I spent a year in hospital. And I don't remember any of this, by the way. And I was told, or my family were told, that don't get your hopes up. The reality is he's not going to survive this. Because when you have the seizure, it leaves a lesion on your brain, and those lesions in 90% of cases become an inoperable brain tumour. And I had at least 7 that they could find. And so the chances were not good. And I was in hospital, and the impact was initially that I didn't really know who anyone was, and I thought I was on a cruise ship. And I
With
knew
bad food.
well, no, because I could only taste a few things. I'd lost all sense of smell and taste. I could only taste 3 things: white chocolate, vanilla ice cream, and Coca-Cola. And even now, those things taste like they're made by the hand of God. and I do have a lot of taste back, but those things have remained at the top. So if you want to treat me, give me white chocolate and Coke.
All at once.
But I thought I was on a cruise ship, and my sister tells the story of, we're talking, and I'd say the service on the ship is fantastic. And she said, "Really?" And I said, "Watch this." Push the button, and in had come the nurse. The hostess is on the cruise ship. And I'd say, "I want a bowl of your best ice cream, please." And she'd come in and say, I'd say, "Look at the service, it's fantastic." So the brain is an amazing organ for coping. And it was all about my own mechanism of coping with massive stresses that had come into my life. I believe the encephalitis was caused by that. You can get it from a number of different things, autoimmune. It can come from even mosquito bite.
Yeah.
And there's a great correlation to stress. And I would have thought that I coped pretty well, but my wife deciding that she'd had enough of being with me, and after 20 years of marriage, I just couldn't cope with that. And I've always been a very tolerant person, but my wife choosing to live in a same-sex relationship, and she ultimately married that person, I just couldn't cope with that. And with the 2 kids, it became an enormous burden. And my way of coping, I think, was to collapse into this land of Gaga.
Yeah.
And it didn't last for 7 years. I was in hospital for about a year, and I've got a sister in Canberra. She was my main carer, but I was determined to get back to Sydney. And one of the things that I've always been big on with the athletes that I coach is to keep diaries and keep a record of what they do day to day. And even though I might have been dancing, I was keeping a diary. It's a very surreal thing to open your diary about the wonderful cruise you're on and read about what you're thinking yourself and in the moment. And I'd go in and out of lucid periods of time.
Now you spend time coaching other coaches and trainers. That's part of what you do, and you have an acronym that you've come up with, and I'd really love you to almost to pull it together. You have seen all these incredible athletes with resilience, and now you are kind of on the track. So how did you actually fight
thanks.
this?
So I've always been involved with coach education in Australia and identifying coaches, and I've actually, and not to placate the previous speaker, but I've always been a big advocate for enhancing women in coaching. And I had a couple of female coaches that I brought through in Tasmania, but I wanted to always be my athlete's head, and I came up with an acronym of CNN. So while they're at home relaxing and watching TV and there's a landslide in Venezuela and CNN put the ticker tape in underneath, my athletes are thinking of me. Because CNN stands for consistency, no compromise, no doubt. I say to my athletes, don't tell me that you want to be a world-class athlete if you don't make it to training because you were out late the night before. Don't tell me you want to be a world-class athlete if you don't stick exactly to the program I give you. Don't tell me that you want to be a world-class athlete if you don't consistently eat the right nutrition, supplement, do the strength, whatever it is. Consistency. I'm not really that interested whether you do a personal best every time you perform. What I'm interested in is consistent result, because out of consistency you get a spike of excellence. Yeah. So that's my mantra. The N is no compromise. You can't say, oh, I really want to lose weight. I'll just have one more chocolate. You can't. Sorry. Sorry.
He wasn't talking to you.
I might have been. You can't if you really are fair dinkum about ultimate success, you don't compromise it.
And also John had you'd put on a lot of weight when you were unwell.
Well,
and then...
I was eating white chocolate, vanilla ice cream and Coke, and I'm on a cruise ship and they're pumping me full of steroids so my brain doesn't explode. Yeah. And I look in the mirror and I'm Jabba the Hutt, you know. I put on 25 kilos I put on in there. Yeah. And I'm listening to conversations, which I put in my diary, of, look, don't get your hopes up. The reality is he won't survive this. Yeah. And if he does, he's going to be institutionalised. He will not make it. And look, it whittled down to I had 19 tablets a day, and I can recall very well having the conversation with the specialist and saying that I'd be on 19 tablets every day for the rest of my life to maintain the equilibrium of my body. And I always knew that was not going to be the case. The second N is no doubt, by the way. And I've never had any doubt that I would get off that stuff. And as I'm speaking to you now, I'm on half a tablet a day. Yeah. And that's going to be gone too.
And so, John, there's so many stories in this. You had your mountaintop moment, you got on a plane against your doctors.
Well, the same doctor that told me I'd been 19 tablets, I said to him, what do you think about me travelling? And he said, oh, look, I don't think it's a very good idea. And I said, oh, really? Just a short flight? Oh, flying. I said, yeah, I want to go overseas. He said, oh, look, I don't think that's a good idea. Where were you thinking of going? And I said, I wanted to go to Japan. I've always had this affinity. There's a thing about Japan. I wanted to go to Japan. He goes, oh, look, I think it's out of the question. What if you go there and you get lost? I said, with all respect, if you don't know where you are in the first place, how the bloody hell can you be lost?
By the way, I booked my ticket for tomorrow.
I was leaving the next morning. Yeah. And I did. So I flew and I got to the airport. I don't know if you know Japan very well, but the transportation there is phenomenal. I got on at Narita Airport, got on the train, and within a few hours I was in the mountains of Nagano, where they had the Winter Olympics. And I went up there, 25 kilos overweight, highly emotional, and cried like a baby. And that was my defining moment where I decided, and even now talking to you, I can feel my friend Limbic tapping me on the shoulder right now. That was my defining moment where I had to say, enough is enough, and this is what I stand for. This is my CNN. This is my moment, and this is what I am going to do. You might say that I'm going to get hit by a brain tumour. I don't agree with your verdict. You may say, I will not get back to normal function, but I will. I had to, because I had to get back to my kids.
Yeah.
My kids were waiting for me.
Amazing. And I mean, you're the testament of that here. Now let's talk about your other kids, Ishmael and Buster, and tell us about what you're doing with these, their resilient story I'd love to look at as well.
Well, again, I found coaching, you talk about resilience. For me, it's about giving and understanding who you are. And if you actually look at that word resilience, get rid of the re and drop a letter and you've suddenly got silence and you find yourself within the silence. And my time on the mountaintop in Japan was my silence, and I had to give. I thought it was really just about giving to my kids, but I started back into coaching really just to develop my own skill set and get my mind working again. On the side of that, I also, to get off the drugs, and on the mountaintop I decided I needed to find an alternate to the anti-inflammatory drugs they were giving me. So I enrolled in a degree at Deakin University in nutrition, and I wanted to know about the anti-inflammatory properties of food. That way I could also know if they weren't just going to say, oh look, the poor thing, we'll just pass him because he's had a hard time. No, I either remembered it or I didn't. I could recall the facts or I couldn't. So that was one reason, but I also want to know about the anti-inflammatory properties of food. So all these things are on the go, and I'm coaching. And I'm down at the track this night, and this guy is probably about 6'3". He's from the Gambia. And he walked over to me and he goes, you a coach? I said, yes, I'm a coach. And he says, I'm an athlete, you coach me. And I said, can you run? And he says, yes. I said, let me have a look. He took 2 steps. I went, okay. Now, his name is Abduli, and Abduli comes from the Gambia, and his mum is Christian, his dad is Muslim, and his name is Abduli, Muslim, but he identifies with his mother. And the issue, if I can simplify it, is he's got to make a choice, and if it's not Muslim, he's in big trouble, and he does not want that. So he came here for the Commonwealth Games and decided that he would stay. And he met someone there, and they said to him, don't go to Brisbane, it's too small, I'll find you there. Go to Sydney, go to this place, and writes Parramatta on a piece of paper and says, get off the bus at Parramatta, I'll meet you there. Can you imagine? Now, when he first started with me, and with great respect to some Africans that are here, but when I first started with Buster, we call him Buster because it was much easier to remember than Abduli, and he called himself Buster. But sometimes he'd be, don't you agree? That's what I'd hear. And so, can you imagine getting this piece of paper, and you're in Africa, and you've decided you're going to stay there, and you're fearful, and someone says, get off at Dubba Dubba Dubba. Yeah. He's on that bus for 10 hours or more, looking at every town. Yeah. Is this Dubba Dubba Dubba? Yeah. And finally gets off at Parramatta. There's no one there. Wow. He waited at the bus stop for 3 days. No one came. He found a McDonald's and worked out that the children quite often order McDonald's, go and play and don't eat their food. So he'd wait for the kids to leave and then he'd eat the food that was left behind. There's a lot of food in Australian bins, he tells me. And he was begging people for money. And somehow he found his way to the track. And somehow he found me. And he saved me.
Wow, John. Tell us about that. How has he saved you? Because you guys have this great friendship, and I mean, for a while, Buster was in a men's shelter, but he was too embarrassed to let other people know. So he would come, and now he's training for Olympics.
Yes. He's one of our best athletes. Well, the great part of that story was we had to work, and I found out that he didn't have much money, so I was able to give him money and things all the time. I'd pick him up, take him things. We got into his own house. He's got his own apartment now. He's even got his own car. He's got a couple of jobs. It was been every step of the way. Just keep growing the person. I don't coach athletes. I coach people, and you have to. If you want to coach a person, you've got to touch their soul. Yeah. So it was great working with him, and so having him and seeing him improve bit by bit. And he got to nationals, and he was in our top athletes there. And I said to them, I want to take you to Tasmania. I want to take you down there for the gift. So we went down there. I said, you're not going to win anything. Just let's go for fun. So I went down and I took them to all these places, up into Cradle Mountain, and we had a wonderful time. And we got to the Bernie gift, and it's where they put them on handicap. And Buster ended up being way back because he was the fastest of all of them. And what do you know? He won it.
Wow. There is resilience.
$9,000.
Oh, wow.
He wins $9,000. So he's gone from getting food out of a bin, $9,000.
Awesome.
But the important thing to know about this man is we were at the airport, and I've actually got 3 refugees and in my group, and one of the girls, we call her Happy because she's never happy. And so, so Happy says, Coach, she's from Nigeria, this is my Nigerian accent, Coach, look what Buster give me. And I looked over and Buster had given her $500 cash.
Sweet.
And then I said, really? And
was she happy?
She was. And then one of the other guys said, he gave me money too. I went, oh no. So I've gone over to him and I said, Buster, you just don't give your money away, mate. He says, don't tell me what to do with my money. They get nothing. I have all this. I can share my money. We all share together. They are with me.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
That was great. Lesson for me.
And if I encourage you to have a look online, because there's, I think it was Channel 9 News did a story on Buster, and he's running with a child.
Yeah, I had another boy who's now actually, we've moved into another coach, but he's got cerebral palsy. And I worked with Jackson for a couple of years, and he and Buster had this great connection.
Yeah.
And the clip that Channel 9 did, they called it The Odd Couple. And they really were, great. So I've got Happy as well, and she's quite talented, but it's been harder for Happy in terms of her transitioning into this community. And my other fellow is from Sierra Leone, and his name is Ismail Dudu Kamara. And he has just been growing and growing as a person. And I think, in fact, I don't think, I actually know, that he will go to a higher level even than Buster, I think. Yeah, right. And the great thing about them, Ismail is about 4 years younger than Buster, but they knew each other in Africa. So Sierra Leone and the Gambia are not that far. So excuse my explanation, but it'd be like growing up in Sydney and growing up in Melbourne, and you've gone to the Australian Championships and you've seen each other there at the African Championships. You know who each other are.
Yeah.
Now they're in the training squad on the other side of the world with the same coach.
It's incredible.
And we do all these things together. It's fantastic.
Well, what I love about John and why I wanted his story is because there's layers of stories. It's almost is like the babushka doll of resilience. And I think it's almost, you know, people are helping each other, and you are such a father figure for Buster and these people, but vice versa, they're helping you as well. So I think it's not just the one person that's forging against the rest, but I feel that this is part of that collective resilience.
Oh, I think resilience is, it's to not be focused on you. I think we've got sometimes I think the Australian culture is Paul bugger me, it owes me a living. Yeah. How come I can't get more of that? How come he got that or she got that? And you've got to get beyond that and start thinking, let's go together. And how can you grow people? It's through doing that I've learnt so much about myself. I've always been a person, I think, to look for the best in other people and grow that. But it's just so important, and it's just been such a different challenge culturally, religiously, ethnically, to have to find your skill level. Coaching is not hard. Coaching's about just being you and being authentic. But how can you make someone better than what they are? And that's about believing in who they are, what they are, and where they're going. We did this exercise about 3-4 weeks ago, where I said to them, I want you to tell me what you'll be doing in 6 days from now. I'm asking you this, by the way. What are you going to be doing in 6 days from now? And you can probably think, oh, well, I'll be doing the shopping because that's my shopping day, or I've got an appointment at the hairdresser, or whatever it might be. What will you be doing in 6 weeks? Probably answer that. 6 months, 6 years from now. And what does that look like? What does it look like? Smell like? Feel like? You know, there's a saying about music that you don't really understand the lyrics until something's happened to you and you actually listen to it and you feel the music. I got my athletes to come over home and they had to then draw what 6 years looked like. Where will you be in 6 years? And they drew pictures. Some of them were abstract, some were quite childlike. But I've learned so much about my athletes because they're captured on a little piece of canvas. I can see what their hopes and dreams, ambitions and fears are in a snapshot like that. And it's a very powerful thing. So we put them all together with their flag. I feel like I coach the United Nations of track and field. And I put it into a resilience logo, which is the infinity sign. And it's the flag and their drawing, flag and their drawing. So to you it probably doesn't mean much, but to them they just look at it and it brings back. They all know they're all in it together and we're working together. The power of community and the power of bringing all of your senses in, be that what it looks like, sounds like, feels like. But at the end of the day, I say to them, stop dreaming. You need to learn to dream with your eyes open and being able to see what something looks like without closing your eyes. That's the true gift of coaching, I think.
It's an amazing gift for us, John. Please thank John for this. Thank you. Grab a seat. So from the Gambia to Sierra Leone, so Aminata, join us up here on the stage. Please welcome Aminata Ponteviga on the spot. This story is amazing, and this lady has had me in tears, and it's very, very inspiring. But if you've had a look at her story, Aminata, at a very young age, when most girls, are thinking of future and life, she was kidnapped by rebels in Sierra Leone and had a terrible experience, which we're going to talk about as well. So I thank you for your openness and bravery ahead of this. And we are so blessed to have you in our country and doing incredible work. But I would love you to tell us, as we explore your story, the present. What are you so grateful for now? There's been terrible things in the past, but let's look at the things. Tell us about you now.
Me now. I think first and foremost, I always say I sit in a place of gratitude and empathy because that makes me feel for others. And me now is my 2 delicious babies, Seraphine and Matisse.
Not so little babies
Not
now.
so little babies. And me now is really serving. I've always wanted to serve. Since I was a little girl, I saw my dad really just giving, and I thought his job was giving. So I knew that from a very early age that whatever I was going to be doing in this world, I have to make another human being feel important or feel like they've been seen or been heard. So with that, I felt like listening is something that I've always sort of tried to embrace a lot every single day, to pay attention.
Well, let's talk about your father, because he's a big character in your upbringing. So
Yes.
he was a very wealthy man in Sierra Leone and a Muslim. So tell us about how he treated people and the childhood that you had.
So I grew up with 3 siblings. We are 9. My dad was a Muslim, so he married. He had 4 wives, and we had siblings that lived overseas. But he also during that time he also divorced all of his wives. I'll not get to that part.
He's a good person.
He's a good person. We're getting there. But one thing about my father was you would take everything from him, but you will not take his children. And that was something that was very almost rare to see, especially his daughters. His daughters were incredible precious to him, and it was very even till this day. It's not just Africa; it's a lot of culture where the boys are more sort of superior and treated differently to the girls. My dad was completely the opposite, and education was incredibly important, but also he wanted us to be safe and well. He was very disciplined. Yeah. Get smacked. That's what it means.
Yes,
When we did something wrong. But he really wanted us to. We lived in this area in the capital city of Syria, which is Freetown, and we lived in a, well, I think the West would say poor, but we don't see it as poor. Even though we lived in this big mansion, in this big house, we were surrounded by people who didn't have anything. But my dad wanted us to live that way so we don't see others as less, and see also the way he treated these people. And we could see as children, we could just sit and have conversation with my siblings and go like, why is he doing that? Why is he, like, we'll be hearing our dad crying in a neighbor's house because somebody has died, and like really crying for that family. And he was so invested in the in the community, and people loved him. And we were complaining all the time of how strict he was. Like, you know, as a child, or teenager, you like everything your dad said no to, you just hate. And we didn't understand why people loved him. But he really treated people with respect, and he made sure, for me, coming to Australia, I could never put somebody that I see in the street, a beggar, homeless person, I can't differentiate them with somebody that live in a mansion. My dad wanted us to see people as that, as treat people as equal, and that was a really important legacy that he left with us, that wherever you are, you got to treat people kind and with respect, because you do not know where you're going to meet them. And he always say, are you going to bow your head when you see them, or are you going to lift your head up? So that was something I would always say, the world is a circle. When you see people, are you going to lift your head up and say hi? Or are you going to be shy because of what you've done to them, or the way you've treated them, or the way you've looked down on them? And meaning that your condition is not permanent. Things can change. And for us, that's what happened.
And I love when you were saying he wouldn't, I mean, against culture, he wouldn't even roll his eyes at a woman. He was very respectful.
He was very respectful of a woman. He never, the idea, I mean, the kids get smart, but he never rolled his eyes on. We never saw our dad, even when he was divorced with his wives, they speak of each other so respectfully. Like, I still sometimes think my mom was still married to my dad, the way they talked of each other, they spoke about each other. So I didn't grow up resenting my dad for not letting me see my mom, or my mom for leaving. I didn't have to know the story. I only found out about the story during writing my book, because I wanted to hear my mom's voice, how she felt when she couldn't raise me, and I was an only daughter, and I know she was hurting or raising me. So I wanted to hear the story, but also I was in a place where I can't resent my dad. I really love that the way I've been raised by him. And
if we think about that childhood and then the counter opposite, like great cruelty at the hands of men and soldiers. Can you tell us about what happened with, again, as much detail as you're comfortable, or as little? Kind of tell us what happened.
Well, the war in Syria had been going on since 1990, and we live in the city where we've really seen refugees coming into Freetown, transporting, and we've heard stories of girls being taken away because the rebels will want young girls, especially when they never been with a man before. And we've seen one of the signature part of the war was really amputation. They would cut the hands and say long sleeve or short sleeve. So we saw that because refugees were flowing to the capital city. So it was not really a shock for us in Freetown, but because the war has taken that long, we were not sure if it's actually going to enter the capital city. So I remember we were all sleeping. It was a school night, and we just listened. We just heard this really loud voice, and the moment we heard that loud voice, we knew straight away they've entered the capital city. By the time we woke up, watching through the windows, it was just full of smoke. and we could just see the horror of what was happening. You can see people just running, but their body's been laid. You can hear people being burned in their house. And our house, the way our dad built it, was almost like a prison, because we had the security, and the windows were bulletproof. It was built like with sort of ironstone, and he really made us feel completely safe. So we could see people outside, but people never see us from the inside, the windows. So it was really, we're in this place where we're seeing the horror, but you can't even take your eyes off it, because you can't even justify not looking.
Sure.
That's what was happening. We can't take our eyes off seeing people, or the smoke, or people, like watching people being chopped. And I remember my dad come upstairs to us, and we knew that him coming upstairs was to make sure that we're all going to be together. If that was what was going to happen, we have to be together as a family. If they were going to burn the house, he didn't want us to go out running at all. He made sure he locked all the gates. And then a few minutes after, we just hear a lot of people just hitting our door. And for some reason, I've always felt like as a child, and even now, that my house was guided by angels, because our house was huge. But all the houses around us has been burned down. Our house was the only house that was standing. And the rebels would keep passing it. They didn't come in for weeks. And there were many people who, I still don't understand how, because the big house was the one that you don't want to go hide, take a refuge.
Yeah,
but that was the house that they went to take refuge. And for weeks that the war was happening, we seen rebels, but no one hit the door to knock at the door, and everybody was completely still. And my grandfather, who is the loudest man in the universe, was dead quiet. And kids, even children, can tell that they should not cry.
Yes.
It was almost like a storybook. Nobody was making a sound. You see people crawling down the stairs if they want to go downstairs, because they don't want to be seen in case. And I remember this day that we just heard one knock at the door, and one of the rebels said, "Oh, people are in here." And we just knew that, this is the time for us. And they asked us to come out, and we came out. We went to this little compound, outdoor compound, and I was holding my dad's hand. And he had Parkinson then, and his hand was shaking, because when you hold somebody who had Parkinson, they keep it still, to keep it still. And we all just standing there, and I just saw one of this rebel, Darami, looked at me. The moment our eyes locked in, I knew he was coming for me. And then as he was walking towards me, and he said, by the time he's saying the word, "You come here," I let go of my dad's hand and walked towards him, and I never turned back.
Yeah.
And for me, the decision, I didn't know how to react. It was the first time I had to protect my father, or no, knowing him, how he would react. Letting go was just the possibility of what would have happened if he fought. They would have killed him, or give me a gun to shoot him. There's so many stories that were so familiar that I didn't want to. So letting go and not looking back, that was deliberate. But again, it's just the body making those decisions. And so when Darami took us, it was really great, because he didn't let us stay. He just walked away with us. So I was not able to look at my dad's face. So that's been, apart from other things, that's been like the most painful part for my...
And then you were on the run for months, and often used as shields, and you were part of a hostage exchange, which again was a bit of a miracle. That
it is a miracle. It's not a bit of a miracle at all. It was really, I've always count my life every single day. I say it is a miracle, and I wake up every morning. The moment I'm conscious that I'm awake, I say thank you, God, for just being here, because those few months that I was kidnapped, I still don't have memory of how long. It was horror, because it was one of the most intense time. There were skills that, again, the topic of resilient. I think when you're in a place of surviving, I never thought I knew how to even kill a fly. You just there's something. There's nothing special about me. There's not special about anyone at all. I always tell people that, because the things that I was capable of doing, that I did to survive, I for 1 second didn't think I had them in me. And it was very intense. There were times that I remember a friend of mine who, my ghostwriter interview, we took, when the helicopter was flying, we took like dead body just to pretend like we were dead.
Yeah.
I don't even know how I can do that.
Yeah.
How we could think of that. There were so many things that we did every single day. It was, even as I tell it in the book, I can never really describe those moments. But when I got released, it was something really, really horrible that happened to me the night before. One of the rebels that have really attacked me really badly. And I for some moment, I don't know what happened. I remember I went to my friend in this place where we were settling, Frances, and I was crying, and I said, oh, I've heard that they're going to release some children, and I still don't believe that I will ever be released at all. I don't know why I said it, and I remember saying it to Frances, I'm going to be released, and I could see Frances. She cried because she knew it was impossible. She knew, because we were kidnapped together. The rebel Darami kidnapped 4 women, but he didn't want any of them. He became really obsessed with me. So for Frances were free. My 3 friends were free. And of course, in a place like that, you say, why me? But why should it be them also? Why does he not want them? So that was really, for me, that was my hell. Why would he kidnap? What was about me that he wanted? And for me, growing up with my dad, beauty was from the inside. So I never really know what, oh, you're beautiful and stuff. We grew up very strict. So when he would say all the time beautiful, I didn't really understand what I meant, because I was like, but God, how can he see the beauty from the inside? So, and I remember Frances cried. And then I walked away, and Darami was so mad because of what had happened between the rebel and I, and then shot over 7 shots over my feet. I do not know how none of them touched me. And I remember it was just this beautiful space that I believe I believe God intervened in places where you don't think it's possible, because he walked away being angry, and I walk away to go wait for him in his place. And then this person, this rebel, that I've done this horrible thing to me, called me and asked me if I wanted to go. And for that moment, I saw the most vicious person. There was a shame. There was something that he felt that he should not have done. And the way that he could ask for forgiveness was to let me go. Yeah. And Darami, where if he was there, would have shot me instead of me going. But he had gone. And it was so, it's been, I think I will always call my life, define my life as a miracle, because he wasn't meant to go anywhere. He wanted to take me and go, but because he was so mad, he walked away. Yeah. And by the time he came, I was gone. Yeah. And even Frances did not know, all my friends did not know that I was gone until they heard my name on the radio. Because we listened to radio when we were kidnapped. The rebels have radio to listen to BBC News, to hear what is happening. We listen to news all the time.
And this was televised as well. It was an exchange for food. And
yeah.
And again, it was mostly children. And you were 16.
No, I was 18 when that happened. And so I was among the children, and it was almost like, it's like a movie scene. We walking in the middle of the street and being given to the government, and being given, we walked, and even at that time, there was a word that if there was any fire shot, we were going to be the casualty in that space. So then we going away, it went peacefully, and then we got exchanged, and then my friends and family found out I was released on television.
Yeah, and there's so much in that as well. But I think what you decided, because it was with the United Nations, they wanted to bring you somewhere safe, and you wanted to come to Australia. So for you, I mean, again, you're coming from a crisis and a traumatic situation to a country where you know no one. So again, resilience is required for you. But you had such a... I remember we were talking and you were saying people were shocked that this is not what a refugee looks like, because you loved fashion and obviously beautiful in the way that you carry yourself. So again, it speaks to Helen's idea of, we have this idea of kind of, you know, what people look like as refugees. And so how was that experience for you, and how did you process over the couple of years when you were here?
Well, when I was here, I think I had to process a lot of things. First of all, I had to learn that I was a black girl. I didn't know this, that was. So that was 20 years ago, and I was like, why are people so curious about me? And then I realized, oh, there's a thing. So I had to, so it was such a journey, because my dad was a businessman. We had white people coming from overseas staying in our house. So there was nothing special between any, I mean, we're all special. There was nothing, any sort of that. So when I came and I had to go to school. That was the other thing. I was 20 years old when I came to Australia, and my age has been chopped down to like, gone down to like 16. So I was a 20-year-old girl sitting in school. And I get asked these questions I was so curious as to why are they asking me all these questions. Have you seen lions and all these things? And so I said to the girls, I'm like, yeah, I saw them at Taronga Zoo. I'm like, I don't see lions. So it was I was curious as to why they were asking me these things. And when, in my home, presentation was so important with my father. When we would present ourselves to people, because he always, like, people will always judge you first before they know your name, the way you, so we always dress immaculate. Like, so when I came here, I remember going to UNHCR function, and I love fashion. I could not afford it, so I worked for David Lawrence and get free clothes. I remember going to UNHCR, but I could tell, because every time we have Australia, we have a party, and I'll dress up and I'll go, Australians are wearing thongs. I'm like, oh, this is not working out. I'll dress up and then I'll go to the party and I'm the only one dressed up. They go like, where are you going? I'm like, here.
Where are you going?
Where are you going? So I had to adjust into the lifestyle, but I will never forget, and this was so profoundly striking, because I was a UNHCR, and it was somebody that works for has a really high position. And I remember my friend introduced me to her. This is Aminata. She's from Sierra Leone, and she's a refugee. And the way she flipped, and she looks at me. At first I thought, I was like, oh, nice. And then she goes, you're not a refugee. And I'm thinking like, oh, maybe there's something I'm not saying right. And I no, I'm a refugee. She goes, no, but you look like a model. And I thought to myself, like, I mean, that's the thing with Australia, because I call it polite racism, because they give you those comments and then you can't say nothing, because if you get mad, you're almost like the crazy one or the angry one. So you have to always take it and almost take the compliment.
You need to speak with Helen.
You almost have to take the compliment and go like, oh, thank you. But and that's what I did. And then I remember walking away, I'm thinking like, what does refugee look like? This woman has been in camps. You know, people don't have choice that stayed in camp. How can you work for an organization that supports refugees and you think, really, this is how they've been brought up? I mean, we end up being friends, but for me, those are the questions that, and I believe people who are really comfortable with you are asking too. And ignorance as well. Ignorant, and
Now, I'm conscious of time as well, so I want to get to the foundation, because you have taken matters into your own hands, and instead of just working with UNH, you founded the Aminata Foundation, Maternal Foundation. So tell us about the plight of women in Sierra Leone and what you're doing to help that.
So the Aminata Maternal Foundation work in Sierra Leone, just because Sierra Leone have the highest infant and maternal mortality rate in the world. 1 in 17 women die through childbirth, and in Australia it's 1 to 8,700. It's really just really horrible, the stats there. It's even worse than that, and this is quoting World Health Organization again. But so we work in really reducing the statistics, and it's been done before Ebola happened. Sierra Leone really went to almost 50% in halving the infant mortality.
Keep talking.
Halving the that's the shortcoming, starting dances. Halving the infant mortality, and the way we decided to do that is to really change the way our development work. Instead of going in as a Western organization, a big organization, and starting things fresh, we partner with a woman that has the same value that I feel like I had, or I wanted to work with, and really expand the work she's doing, we're doing together. Yeah. So we are the second busiest maternal hospital in the country. It's private, but the services are completely free, and the standard of quality is the standard of UK and Scotland. So really, amazing. It's something that just lights me up and give me just joy.
And I'd encourage you to have a look at the book, because this is on bookshelves now, but also to have a look at the Aminata Foundation, because I did the walk. I walked my butt off for 2 weeks. But it's incredible. And your story of resilience, we can barely scratch the surface of it. But for you, what is the one thing that has allowed you to be resilient through your life and all these situations?
Oh, the one thing is the idea that I am able to wake up every morning and I'm breathing. That's simply that. I mean, I think sometimes we have to wait until things happen in our life for us to really get up, for us to really celebrate. It doesn't matter what is happening in my life. I like celebrating every day, and to know that I am able to breathe and I'm able to get up every morning. My dad had this philosophy that every time you wake up, when you wake up in the morning, fix your bed. Then you're able to you get going. So I've always really, that is like the core part of my life. I wake up in the morning and I root for joy, and I drag it under the bed, and I'll do anything just to feel that. And whatever happens during the day, it doesn't hit me down, because I know I'm up there. So it will take me in the middle, and then I'll go up again. So I think really that just life, to be able to breathe.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks.
Please thank Aminata for me. And the lights have gone off, my battery's ended, so we have gone over time. But thank you so much to everyone and to the incredible speakers here. And I bid you all good night. Thank you. So good.